My name is Kennedy Price, and I'm 39 years old. The day my husband walked out on me because I chose my dying father over the next rung on my career ladder, I thought I had lost everything. He didn't just leave. He showed up at the hospital with his new girlfriend on his arm, smirking, as if to prove to me what ambition really looked like. That was the day my marriage ended. But it was also the day I started to understand a truth that would change my life forever. Sometimes losing someone is actually winning your life back. If you're listening to this, please subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments. I share real stories about loyalty, betrayal, and discovering your true worth. And your support helps this message reach others who need to hear it. What happened at the will reading didn't just change my future, it left an entire room in shock, including the CEO of my ex-husband's company. 2 years ago, I was on track to become one of the youngest directors at a tech firm in Austin, Texas. I had the title Senior Marketing Manager, the corner office with glass walls, the salary that made my friends raise their eyebrows. My days were filled with client pitches, product launches, and the constant thrill of proving myself in a competitive industry. I thought I knew what my future looked like: fast, shiny, and unstoppable. Then came the diagnosis. My father, my anchor, my compass, the man who raised me after my mom passed away, was told he had late-stage pancreatic cancer. 18 months, the doctor said, if we were lucky. I sat there in that sterile office, the words still hanging in the air, and felt something inside me shift. My career ladder suddenly didn't matter. My father mattered. I told Ethan, my husband, that night over takeout in our kitchen. He reached across the island, squeezed my hand, and said, "We'll get through this together." I believed him. For 3 weeks, I believed him. But support has an expiration date for some people. When I told my boss I needed to scale back, Ethan's smile turned brittle. By the time I went part-time, he'd stopped asking about Dad's treatments. When I finally took an indefinite leave, he didn't hide his irritation anymore. "Your father has nurses, Kennedy," he said one evening, barely glancing up from his phone. "Why ruin your career playing Florence Nightingale?" This martyr act isn't attractive. It was more than unattractive to him. It was, in his words, a waste of potential. The pressure wasn't just from him. His mother, Margaret, made sure I felt the weight of her disappointment every Sunday dinner. She'd slice into her roast chicken with surgical precision and remark, "Such a shame about your career, Kennedy. Ethan needs a partner who matches his ambition." I bit my tongue, but inside I was screaming. They didn't know my father. They didn't know how he had built a small construction business from nothing, raised me single-handedly, and never once complained about what he had sacrificed for me. Nurses could manage his IV drips, but they couldn't give him what he truly needed: his daughters. Presence during the hardest fight of his life. That's when the financial control began. Ethan moved our savings into an account that required both signatures for withdrawals. He said it was just being responsible. Then came the allowance. "Until you're working again," he said, sliding a credit card across the counter, like he was doing me a favor. The breaking point came in the parking lot of a hole. Foods. Dad's oncologist had recommended an experimental medication that insurance didn't cover. It cost $3,000. I asked Ethan for the money. He exploded. $3,000? For pills that probably won't even work? Your father has Medicare. Why should I fund his medical experiments when he never even liked me? His voice was loud enough that shoppers turned their heads as they passed with their carts. I felt my cheeks burn. But what stung worse was the truth buried in his words. Dad had always been polite to Ethan, but never warm. He sees through facades. Dad once told me, that day, in that parking lot, I realized Ethan wasn't just unsupportive, he was planning a future without me. The cracks in my marriage widened until they weren't cracks anymore. They were chasms. Ethan started coming home later and later, always with a reason. Networking events, client dinners, urgent work calls. His suit smelled faintly of perfume I didn't wear. His phone never left his side, and when it buzzed during dinner, he'd excuse himself like the world would collapse if he didn't respond. One night, he left it charging in the kitchen while he showered. A text preview lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night, babe." Brianna, I stared at it, my stomach twisting, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. The denial I had been clinging to snapped in that moment like a brittle thread. I dug deeper. Her name was Brianna, a lifestyle influencer with thousands of followers. Her feed was a glossy carousel of yoga poses, flat white lattes, rooftop cocktails, and captions about removing toxic people and building your dream circle. And there he was, Ethan in the background of more than one post. His arm draped around her waist, both of them holding champagne flutes like they were the cover of some power couple magazine spread. One caption read, "Couples who hustle together, thrive together," she tagged him. His comments were full of heart emojis and words like vision, drive, unstoppable. Meanwhile, I was sleeping in a hospital chair beside my father's bed. The humiliation didn't stop online. At his company's happy hour, Ethan told colleagues that I had given up on life to be a full-time nurse. "I need a partner, not a charity worker," he'd said, 3 martinis in, with Brianna hanging off his arm like a trophy. Then came the papers. A courier walked into Dad's hospital room carrying a manila envelope. I thought it was test results. Instead, it was divorce papers. Ethan wanted the house. Half my retirement savings. He planned to keep all his bonuses from the last 2 years as earned income. I sat at my father's bedside, the machines beeping steadily behind me, staring at the black and white words that demanded I sign away everything. I felt cornered, suffocated, like the walls of that hospital room were closing in. But when I whispered, "I can't fight this, Dad. Not now. Not while you're here like this," he turned his head toward me. His voice was raspy but steady. "Don't worry, Kennedy. I've already taken care of everything." Ethan didn't waste time. One Tuesday afternoon, he showed up at the hospital with Brianna on his arm and a lawyer in tow. They looked like they were walking into a boardroom, not a room where my father was hooked to IV lines. The lawyer, a polished man with a leather portfolio, spread the divorce documents out on Dad's tray table like it was a closing deal. "Sign it now, Kennedy," Ethan said, adjusting his tie. "This is best for everyone. Don't drag this out. Could we do this somewhere else?" I asked, glancing at the heart monitor spiking beside my father. "Why?" Ethan smirked. "You practically live here anyway." Through the glass, Brianna scrolled her phone, her designer dress shimmering under the fluorescent lights. My father's eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. He turned his head toward me and said clearly, "Call Daniel Moore." "Who?" Ethan frowned. "My lawyer," Dad answered, voice firm. "Speed dial 3 on my phone?" The room froze. Within an hour, Daniel Moore arrived. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, carrying a presence that made Ethan's lawyer take a step back. He greeted my father warmly, then turned to Ethan with the kind of professional cool that slices deeper than anger. "Mr. Foster," he said, "pressuring my client's daughter during a medical crisis stops today." Ethan's face turned red. He packed up his papers in silence. Brianna, however, lingered just long enough to say sweetly, "Some daughters know when to let professionals take over. I'll send you the name of a hospice I found." Dad's monitor beeped faster. He lifted his hand, gripping mine. He didn't need to say a word. A week later, Brianna returned. Alone this time. And armed, not with a lawyer. With an iPad. She set it up on Dad's tray table, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation like she was pitching investors. "I've researched the top care facilities," she announced. "This one in Newark has excellent reviews and takes Medicare. Far enough away that you won't feel obligated to visit daily, Kennedy." Dad's spoon clattered into his bowl. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from rage. "Young lady," he said slowly, "what makes you think you have any say in my care?" Brianna laughed, that high, performative influencer laugh. "Well, I'm practically family now. Ethan and I are planning our future, and Kennedy clearly needs guidance." "Get out," Dad said, voice like steel. "Robert, you're emotional," Brianna said, tilting her head like she was explaining something to a child. "This is why families need objective input. I said get out." The entire ward heard it. Nurses stopped in the hallway. Dad's oncologist, Dr. Patel, stepped into the doorway just as security arrived. "This woman is harassing my patient," Dad said. "Please escort her out." Brianna's cheeks flushed red. I was trying to help. Some people actually care about being productive instead of wallowing. "Ma'am," Dr. Patel interrupted. "Leave now." As she was ushered out, Brianna leaned close to me and hissed, "You're going to die alone." Just like him. Dr. Patel wrote everything down in Dad's file, labeling it attempted elder abuse through coercion. That report would become crucial later. Ethan didn't stop either. On LinkedIn, he posted vague, self-congratulatory nonsense. Sometimes you have to make hard choices when your partner gives up on their potential. Growth mindset, difficult decisions. His colleagues chimed in with supportive emojis and comments. Brianna, of course, wrote, "So proud of you for choosing your truth." But then something unexpected happened. One of my old teammates commented, "Interesting perspective. Ethan, isn't Kennedy caring for her dying father?" That sounds like strength, not giving up. The thread exploded. Former coworkers, mentors, even my old boss piled on, sharing their own stories of caregiving. Screenshots of Brianna's hospital selfies started circulating, captioned with her flippant remarks about good vibes and charity cases. And then HR at Ethan's company called me. Quietly, privately. "Ms. Price," the voice on the line said, "we've received reports about Ethan's behavior. Would you be willing to provide documentation?" I forwarded the hospital's security report and the divorce papers he'd tried to make me sign in my father's room. The silence on the other end of the line said more than words ever could. I finally signed the divorce papers on a Thursday afternoon. Dad was having a rare good day, alert enough to sit up, eat solid food, even make jokes with the nurses. Daniel Moore spread the documents across the small table in the family room and looked at me with concern. "You're giving him everything," he said bluntly. "The house, the investments, even the furniture. Are you certain?" "I just want peace," I told him, "for whatever time Dad has left. Fighting Ethan in court means depositions, hearings, and mediations. I can't do that and be here for my father." Daniel frowned but didn't push further. When I signed my name, my hands didn't shake. I wasn't surrendering. I was choosing what mattered. Later, I told Dad it was done. His eyes filled with tears. It was the first time I'd seen him cry since Mom's funeral decades ago. "You deserved better," he whispered. "I have what matters," I said softly, holding his weathered hand. His voice grew steadier. "The best investment I ever made was in you, Kennedy." His gaze held something I couldn't quite read. Sadness, yes, but also satisfaction, like a man who had just finished the last move of a carefully planned strategy. The weeks that followed, he often arrived with sealed folders for Dad to read and sign, sometimes with a notary, sometimes with a witness. Nurses joked that Dad was running the corporate office from his hospital bed. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel say quietly, "Your father is one of the smartest clients I've ever represented. Retirement never diminished that." I didn't understand what he meant until Dad started talking to me about his portfolio. "I've been investing since before you were born," he told me, his voice still strong with that old authority. "Real estate, stocks, index funds. Compound interest is a beautiful thing. Dad, you don't need to—" "Listen," he interrupted. "The Manhattan property alone, I never told Ethan about it. Some things are better kept quiet until the right moment." That was the first time I realized my father had secrets, carefully chosen ones. Then there was the day a professional videographer arrived, setting up equipment in Dad's room. "What's this?" I asked. "Just a message for later," Dad said. "Privacy matters. Even from you, sweetheart." Mini hook. He said he was leaving me something, but I had no idea how big it was. Dad passed away on a quiet Sunday morning. The sun poured golden light into his room as I read him the sports section. "The Rangers won again," I told him with a smile. "You'd love that." His breathing changed, lighter, almost peaceful. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on my face with startling clarity. "Kennedy," he whispered. "You were worth everything. Every sacrifice, every hard choice. You were worth it all." Tears streamed down my face. "I love you, Dad." He gripped my hand with unexpected strength. "Your mother would be proud. I'm proud. Remember this. Real wealth is love, not money." His eyes drifted beyond me, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Helen," my mother's name was his last word. Then his hand went still in mine as the monitors sang their final note. I sat with him for an hour before calling the nurse. In that silence, I realized something. I had lost my father, but I had also kept my promise. He hadn't gone through it alone. That evening, Daniel Moore called. "Your father's instructions were very specific," he said. "The will reading will be in 2 weeks. Both families must attend." "Both families?" I asked. "Ethan and I are divorced." "Your father finalized this will 3 days before his passing," Daniel replied. "He insisted your ex-husband and his companion be invited. He also requested that Victor Reynolds, the CEO of Ethan's firm, attend." I froze. Dad had orchestrated something. Something deliberate, and I was about to find out what. 2 weeks later, I walked into the 38th floor of Moore & Associates, a law office all glass and gravitas. My black dress was simple, dignified, the same one I had worn to my father's funeral. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest, uncertain of what Dad had planned, but knowing it would be deliberate. 15 minutes later, the entourage arrived. Ethan, in a tailored suit, walked in with Brianna on his arm, oversized sunglasses shielding her eyes despite the gray weather outside. Behind them came Ethan's brother, his mother Margaret, and even his divorce lawyer. They swept in like they owned the place. "Must be difficult," Margaret said, her voice sharp but falsely sympathetic. I nodded once, choosing silence over words. Inside the conference room, a long mahogany table dominated the space. At each seat, sealed envelopes awaited. On the far wall, a massive television screen hung dark, waiting. The suspense was thick enough to taste. Ethan smirked. "Seems excessive for a modest estate." Daniel Moore entered right on time, trailed by 2 assistants. And then, unexpectedly, Victor Reynolds, the CEO of Ethan's firm, walked in and took a seat near the back. "Richard?" Ethan stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Your father-in-law invited me," Victor said evenly. "He said this would be educational." My pulse quickened. Dad hadn't just planned this, he'd scripted it. Daniel cleared his throat and began reading. The last will and testament of Robert Price, executed 3 days before his passing, with 2 doctors and a judge as witnesses. Ethan leaned forward. He wasn't lucid. Daniel didn't pause. "To my daughter, Kennedy Price, I leave the following. Liquid assets totaling $3.4 million. The property located at 1287 Park Avenue, valued at $2.2 million, and an investment portfolio of stocks and bonds currently worth $850,000. The room went silent. Brianna's mouth fell open. Margaret gasped. Ethan's face drained of color. "That's impossible," Ethan snapped. Robert was comfortable, not... "There's no mistake," Daniel said coolly. Mr. Price was private about his wealth. He also established strict conditions. These assets are placed in an irrevocable trust, immune from any marital claims, past, present, or future. Should Kennedy reconcile with her ex-husband, the trust remains solely hers beyond his reach. Ethan's lawyer blanched. "That's airtight." "And as for Ethan Foster," Daniel continued, turning a page, "he is left the sum of $1 to be donated in his name to the American Cancer Society, representing the value he placed on family loyalty." Brianna choked on a laugh before covering her mouth. Margaret went stiff as stone. "And finally," Daniel said, adjusting his glasses, "Mr. Price noted that any attempt by Mr. Foster to contest this shall trigger the release of certain documented evidence to relevant parties, including his employer." Every eye turned to Victor Reynolds. He sat forward slightly, studying Ethan like a predator watching prey. Mini Hook. Victor's face changed when he heard his company's name mentioned. Daniel pressed a button on the remote, and the television screen came to life. My father appeared, sitting upright in his hospital bed, wearing his navy blazer over his gown. His eyes were clear, his voice firm. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he said. "Kennedy, my darling daughter, you already know what I've left you." "But they don't know why." He shifted his gaze, as though looking straight through the camera at Ethan. "Ethan Foster, you're probably calculating what you've lost. Millions in cash property investments. You threw it all away the day you told my daughter she was wasting her life on a dying man." Ethan went pale. "Yes, I heard you," Dad continued. "Every word. You stood in my room, thinking I was unconscious, and told Brianna that when I died, it would be payday. That Kennedy's inheritance would make up for her lost career. You even complained about the money she spent on my medication." Victor Reynolds began typing something into his phone. "You saw my illness as an inconvenience, my daughter's love as weakness. But here's what you missed, Ethan. I was never unconscious. I heard everything, and I made sure it was recorded." Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan's lawyer buried his face in his hands. Dad's eyes shifted in the video. "And Brianna, compassion is not content. Families are not photo opportunities. You should learn that before it's too late." Brianna flushed scarlet, her nails digging into her purse strap. "And Victor," Dad said, his voice softening, "I asked you here because a man who abandons family during crisis will abandon anyone. Consider that in your decisions." The video ended. Silence filled the room like a storm waiting to break. Ethan collapsed to his knees right there on the carpet. He grabbed for my hands. "Please, Kennedy, we can work this out. We were married 8 years. This is just a rough patch. I love you, I do. We can fix it. Are you serious?" Brianna exploded, shoving her chair back. "You said she was pathetic. You said she was washed up, a housewife playing nurse. She spun toward me. He told me you were nothing. The words didn't hurt. They only confirmed what I already knew. Victor Reynolds stood, slipping his phone into his jacket. His voice cut the air like a blade. Ethan, my office. Tomorrow, 9 sharp. Don't be late. Ethan looked up, face crumbling. Victor, please. You're finished, Victor said simply. And just like that, the room erupted. Margaret in shock, Brianna storming out, Ethan begging on the floor, and me standing taller than I had in years. The fallout was swift. Within a week, Ethan was quietly removed from the Peterson account, the one he'd been bragging about for years. His promised promotion evaporated overnight. Victor Reynolds played my father's video at the partners meeting, and the words, "payday when the old man dies," spread like wildfire through the industry. His corner office was reassigned. He was shuffled into internal auditing, a dead end for someone who had once strutted around like a future CEO. Brianna fared no better. Someone leaked the security footage of her being escorted out of my father's hospital room, and it went viral. Her followers dropped by the tens of thousands. Her brand deals disappeared. Her captions about choosing positivity and being authentic became the butt of cruel jokes. But while their worlds crumbled, mine began to rebuild. The first thing I did with my inheritance was exactly what Dad would have wanted. I founded the Robert Price Foundation for Family Caregivers. Our mission was simple: to provide financial relief to people who chose love over career when caring for a sick parent, spouse, or child. Then, I launched my own consulting business, on my terms this time. No toxic grind culture, no backstabbing politics, just meaningful partnerships with companies that valued integrity. Word spread quickly, and before long, I had more clients than I could manage alone. I reached out to former colleagues, the very people Ethan once dismissed as not ambitious enough. Together, we built something extraordinary. The Manhattan apartment Dad left me became both office and sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Central Park, and every time the sun set in shades of gold across the skyline, I felt his presence. That space wasn't just mine, it was his legacy. We hosted foundation meetings there, charity dinners, and even quiet support groups for caregivers. On the wall hung our motto, etched in brass, "You were worth everything." Of course, I couldn't avoid hearing about Ethan and Brianna. Industry gossip traveled fast. Ethan applied for jobs, but every search of his name pulled up screenshots of his downfall. Rumors swirled that he had tried online dating, only for potential matches to recognize him from a Reddit thread titled, "Remember the guy who dumped his wife for caring for her dying dad?" Brianna attempted a comeback as a wellness coach, preaching about toxic relationships. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the truth. At one of our foundation galas, she even tried to slip in, no doubt fishing for content. Security escorted her back out onto the street before she could take a single selfie. But the story didn't end with their humiliation. Somewhere in the middle of building my foundation and my firm, I found something unexpected: love. Not the flashy, performative kind Ethan flaunted with Brianna. Something quieter, steadier. His name was David, a pediatric surgeon who volunteered at one of our foundation events. He understood sacrifice, understood service. He held my hand the night I broke down on my father's birthday, and he celebrated with me when we funded our 100th caregiver grant. He didn't just see my worth. He cherished it. Looking back, I realized the betrayal was its own kind of gift. Ethan taught me what love wasn't. My father taught me what it was. My life became everything Ethan once mocked me for throwing away: successful, meaningful, abundant. Built not on climbing ladders, but on choosing love when it mattered most. And I finally understand. Losing someone who doesn't value you is the greatest win of all. If this story resonated, share it with someone who needs to know their worth. And let me know in the comments, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about loyalty?